Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Bartlett, and I'm currently a doctoral student at Arizona State University, and I work with Danielle. We met when I did my master's degree in social pedagogy, also at Arizona State University. I'm excited to share with you all our project that we've been working on here in Arizona, school participatory budgeting.
Daniel Sugurensky, I am the director of the social pedagogy program at ASU, at Arizona State University, and also the director of the Participatory Governance Initiative, also at ASU. And I am very happy to work with Tara, with Madison, with Christy on this project that we have been doing for a few years now. And I see lots of connections between school participatory budgeting and social pedagogy. And we can talk about that later during the presentation. Thank you. Madison and Christy.
Thanks, Danielle. Good morning from Arizona. My name is Madison Rock. I'm the Senior Program Coordinator at a local nonprofit organization, which Christy will tell you a little bit more about in a minute, called the Center for the Future of Arizona. I've been working on school PB since 2016 when Phoenix Union launched the district level model here in the United States. And I learned about it during my undergraduate program in a class with Danielle. So now I am also back at Arizona State University. I'm pursuing a master's in public administration. And yeah, really excited to talk to you all about school PB today. It's one of my favorite topics. Christy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Tate, and I am the director of what we call civic health initiatives at the Center for the Future of Arizona. So we've really embraced that term civic health to look at kind of the broad range of ways that Arizonans are involved in community life and civic life and our democracy. So I get to work really closely with Madison on our number of civic engagement programs and initiatives across the state, but school PB is our very favorite. So we're always excited to get to share about it and get to learn from you all. So thanks for joining us today.
All right, so our agenda will follow here. Do we just have someone new enter?
Yes, we did. Alicia, nice for you to join us.
Alicia, yeah. Welcome, Alicia. Okay.
Does Alicia want to introduce herself a bit?
Yes, sorry, I was a bit sorry. I'm just using the break between and pop into my foster care for a quick foster visit, and I'm coming back and spot on to introduce myself. Sorry for that. Sorry, who am I? I am social worker and social pedagogue. I've got my Polish background, but I'm practicing in UK settings. Yeah, sorry, not sure what else I should say about myself. I'm supervising social worker as well, and delivering social pedagogy trainings to our foster carers, as well as colleagues within the local authority. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So we're just jumping into our agenda and what we'll be discussing today. And we just did introductions. We're going to jump into talking about school participatory budgeting and explicit links to social pedagogy. And then we're going to talk about some of the innovations within the innovation of school participatory budgeting that's happening here in Arizona. And we'll have lots of time at the end for questions, comments, and discussion. Danielle, if you want to introduce Participatory Governance Initiative at Arizona State.
Yes, thank you. I didn't mention before, I have been working on participatory democracy stuff for over 20 years. We started this participatory governance initiative at the Arizona State University in 2011. And basically it is a hub for people who are interested in participatory democracy initiatives and projects anywhere in the world, and civic engagement and civic education, and includes academics, practitioners, students, and we're interested in research, but particularly we're interested in practice and how can we build theory from practice. So, and that connects with, and we connect with other organizations and groups, especially the Center for the Future of Arizona is our favorite partner, and we do great things with them. And with this, I pass it to the CFA.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. So I'll just give you a little bit of context on who we are and kind of what brings us to the school PB work in Arizona. So we're a nonprofit organization, as Madison mentioned. We're an affiliate with Arizona State University, so we have a really close partnership and relationship in our work, and really have this mission of building a kind of brighter future for our state. So we work in a few key areas. The first is really by listening to Arizonans to understand what are our shared values and priorities and goals for the future of the state. So in order to develop kind of a roadmap for the future, we've really turned to Arizonans first through surveys and focus groups and community conversations to help develop that shared framework, which I'll share a little bit about as well. We also then bring data to measure how we're doing on those issues. So we really focus on how do we know, once we know what we all want for the future and have that roadmap built, how do we know where we are? And then use data to prompt discussions about decision-making and what we can do differently. And then we're really focused on working on the ground with partners in education, in K-12 education in particular, in workforce development, we have a set of projects, and then civic engagement. So really, how do we kind of build up the skills of Arizonans to be more involved in civic life? So all of that work is really guided by this vision. We call it the Arizona we want. And as I said, it's really been co-created and developed with Arizonans across the state. So we've partnered with the Gallup organization, for example, to do statewide polls to really identify those shared values and aspirations. And one of the things that we've continued to hear time and time again is this emphasis from Arizonans on stronger civic life. So the desire to have, elected leaders that represent diverse voices, that are thinking long-term, that are data-driven, to have opportunities to be more engaged, to have our elections be really accessible and convenient. So through our own research and process, we've really understood that civic health, or kind of strengthening our civic life, is really important to Arizonans. And then we also believe that that's how we're able to move forward on any, on any of our issues. So I'm sure as all of you share that value, that civic engagement is really critical to be able to then have a stronger education system and greater health and well-being and greater economic mobility. So those are things that we're focused on with civic engagement really as a path to get us there. So you'll hear more about school PB as we go and kind of why we're so passionate about it, but it really is a key strategy for us and how we build up really the next generation of civic leaders for Arizona. And we think it's a really amazing tool to be doing that.
Thank you. All right, we're going to jump into talking about the topic at hand today and then the linkage to social pedagogy. And I'm going to have Daniel take us down the history of participatory budgeting and which school participatory budgeting was born from. Danielle, I think we can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, participatory budgeting, we do use a short version PV. Precedes school participatory budgeting. It started in 1989, 30 years ago, in the city of Porto Alegre in southern Brazil. And in a nutshell, it's a democratic process of deliberation and decision making on budget allocations. So it's a process by which people, ordinary people, decide how to allocate a portion of the budget of the city in a democratic, through a democratic process. As we said before we started this session, budgets are policies without rhetoric. This is where the real decisions are made in the budget. And now there are over 11,500 cities and towns in all continents doing participatory budgeting. including many in the UK, many in Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia, all over the place. From small towns to big cities like Berlin, Madrid, Paris, Seoul, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, etc. And school PV is a more recent phenomenon, and it's a new way of expansion of PV. And we are working in Arizona, particularly with schools. And we'll go into that in a moment, okay? Yeah, here you can see all the places where PV is being implemented. And you can see that there's a lot going on in Europe, in Asia, and in Latin America, but also in Africa, all over the place. Yeah, is the world map. Okay. And before we go into citizenship education, if we can go back, Tara, to the connection with social pedagogy, the first one, I would say just a very few things about the connections to social pedagogy. I would say that the school participatory budgeting connects in many, many ways to the principles and practices of social pedagogy, but I would just mention a few of them to begin the conversation. One is agency. Agency is a key principle in social pedagogy, and school participatory budgeting is about student agency, student voice, giving students a voice and decision-making power over issues that affect them. And one of our assumptions is that this agency is carried later on to other projects. It's not just for PV, but it's transferable to other spaces, and it's a lifelong learning process that can be applied to other spaces and processes. So one is agency. The second is relationships, also an important concept in social pedagogy. Healthy relationships, more trust among students, students and staff, students and teachers, teachers and principals, etc., etc. Schools and school districts, so all the relationships in this ecosystem of schools. Third is democracy, another important value in social pedagogy from the beginning. So it is about creating a more democratic culture, a more democratic institution, the school as an institution, be more democratic, less top-down, less authoritarian, and becoming a more democratic institution, and create also a more deliberative culture in the school and in society. A fourth aspect that I would mention that connects with social pedagogy is capacity building. And it is about creating capacity in schools and particularly among students, yeah, to work together to solve problems. So it's about teamwork, it's about collaboration, all these processes are so important in social pedagogy. And number 5, I would say solutions-oriented. It's about solving real problems, improving the quality of life of people in schools and in their communities, involving the different stakeholders in the community, including students, teachers, parents, and the community at large, to solve actual problems that could improve the quality of life. So I will start just with these 5 connections between school participatory budgeting and social pedagogy. There are many more, yeah, that we can come up later on. For example, civic engagement, and Tara will talk about in a moment how civic engagement is very important in social pedagogy and is a core dimension of school participatory budgeting. And I will stop here, and now we can return to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. So yes, to touch on citizenship education. school participatory budgeting really speaks to this, because there's some challenges that we've kind of zeroed in on our own research, and that a lot of the citizenship education that takes place in school classrooms it's delivered through a static historical lens. That lens is often whitewashed, or there's no action behind those historical teachings. It's often a rote memorization of facts, of people, places, events, and there's often the culmination into some type of standardized assessment. Second, another challenge is the scarcity of authentic opportunities, in that it's more of a fixed approach, and there's not a lot of opportunity to actually develop civic and political capacities or values through experiential learning, or what's been called action civics, or the lived approach. And third, when these capacities are nurtured, that often can open up opportunities for students, but we are not seeing that in terms of every student, every school, specifically low SES, social economic schools, and there's an absence of opportunities beyond student government or student clubs, which is really just that small number of students who already have opportunities, are already advantaged. And this really reinforces inequities in terms of political capital down the line, of which we have called to be the Matthew effect of citizenship education. This is a bit of what Danielle had spoken to. I do want to highlight that middle column in gold, because that is where school participatory budgeting really lends itself to social pedagogy in terms of civic learning. We have what's called the CASP, so the knowledge, the attitudes, the skills and practices that students learn throughout the school participatory budgeting process. And that really does then lend itself to both the pedagogical approach of social pedagogy and then the public participation that we hope that students will, post high school, engage civically in their communities and political life. And Danielle, did you want to add anything more on the social pedagogy?
Yeah, the central concept in social pedagogy is community, is building communities, building healthy communities, and this is central to PB. And the other thing that I would mention is that it has been used in many other settings outside municipalities and schools, like public housing, for example, cooperative housing, non-profits, etc., etc. Yeah.
The other aspect of school participatory budgeting is this idea of participatory democracy. So bringing to the forefront both the deliberative democracy model and then the direct democracy model, wherein students are able to be directly involved throughout the entire process and also have opportunities, multiple opportunities oftentimes throughout the process for deliberation of the different ideas. And this really does come down to the nurturing of citizenship learning and lifelong civic engagement, of what we call the circle there. It's essentially promoting this reciprocal relation between the democratic learning and participatory democracy, and that it can foster more democratic citizens and healthier democracies when given the opportunity to engage in these opportunities and learning processes. And this really boils down to this idea of social change behind social pedagogy. So all these different concepts and practices brought into the PB process, the school participatory budgeting process, that hopefully will then transform communities and societies and give students the agency and tools to do so. And from here, we're going to talk about the process in greater detail, and then also discuss some of the innovations that have happened within the participatory budgeting innovation. And I'm going to play a video for us.
It's only 4 minutes. It's under 4 minutes.
Yep.
And this video is from 2016, at the beginning of the process, when there were only 5 schools. Now there are over 50. There are almost 50 schools But at that time, there were only 5 schools, was the beginning.
All right. Are you able to hear it?
Yeah, no, no
You're not
sound.
able to hear it? Okay. Let's see.
So this is when the Phoenix Union High School District decided to implement this process in 5 schools after a pilot in 1 school for 2-3 years.
Sarah, it's
Yes.
when you share your screen, so you have to stop sharing the video, and then when you go back and share your screen, then you have to click for video link.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I have it. Let's try it again.
Community, or you go to school in
You
any
able to hear
place,
it?
you should be able to have a say.
You can go back to the beginning.
The
Yeah.
money that affects.
There you go.
If you live in any community or you go to school in any place, you should be able to have a say in how to spend the money that affects your life.
What are the real needs of the community? If you only have a certain amount of money, what is it that you can do that's going to benefit as many people as possible?
Phoenix Union was the first school-based program to be initiated, and we were wondering how will this work in the school community, and it's worked beautifully.
It empowers the students and it teaches them about the importance of civic engagement in a way that will actually impact them.
We're implementing a project that we call participatory budgeting.
That's done by splitting up and coming up with ideas.
Each grade level had 50 ideas, and then we had to take all 50 ideas from each grade level and then make them smaller.
And then you present those ideas to the students.
And from there, we made proposals, and then now we have people voting on which project they want to see new here.
The students are going to be the ones that are going to be deciding this, not the teachers.
You're going to be able to see a change that the whole school is actually deciding on.
Seeing everybody come together and participate in this one thing that is going to benefit them and our school as a whole was exciting to see.
Participatory budgeting is not only an investment in the school, but it's an investment in our students' critical thinking, communication, problem-solving abilities, and their buy-in and ownership of the school.
If the students as a whole decide on what the school gets to be or what it gets to have, it's much more empowering to the student. It's like they have control over what environment they're raised in.
Sometimes we don't even have a voice, we don't have a say in anything. So this honestly does help.
This is actually my first time that I've ever voted in something.
It makes people want to be better advocates for themselves and not having that hesitancy to say what you want because it's your community.
I ended up voting for the water project.
A garden,
the musical instruments,
the fitness,
the shade,
the art supplies,
the audio and visual one.
Thanks for voting.
Thanks for voting. We want future Americans to be engaged and make sure that they're able not just to make choices and have opinions, but actually go and do the democracy.
And an informed vote counts for a lot. And I think having an opportunity to start practicing that now in a positive change that you see on campus, it's proof of concept for a lot of people.
It's made me think about being a citizen, and so working with other people and getting their ideas really expands my mindset.
When I get older, I still want to be seeing what's wrong with my community, coming up with ways to fix it, and then acting upon it. That's what I like doing. I just never really gotten the chance to act upon it till now because of PVP.
With this experience, I can go much higher, possibly even the government, to do bigger projects that is not just in a school or a community, but possibly the whole city.
And if our job is to create great young men and young women, the PV process, in our opinion, it's a no-brainer.
So I was a little bit nervous, not understanding how we would make this work in a school setting, but the guidance that's provided through Participatory Budget Project really made this easy.
PB's process is really important and kind of easy and practical for every high school.
It happens in cities, it happens in districts, it happens in public housing.
Anybody across the country, across the world could probably do PB really easily.
All right, I think that I'm up next, so I'll get us started. I'll talk a little bit about how the process works and how it's organized in the school setting, and then I'll transition into kind of how it got started here and the evolution of school PB in Arizona. But as Danielle mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the school PB model really stems directly from the municipal PB model. So in the school setting, students and school stakeholders are empowered to decide how school or school district funds are used to improve their campus communities. It's typically organized in 5 key steps that you see here on the screen, and the cycle is iterative. So it starts, and then year after year, it starts over again. So in the beginning, people come together to design the process. This might be school leaders, district administrators, also students who are deciding on the budget allocation. They're deciding on the timeline for the process, who can participate in the different phases, kind of writing the rules and regulations that will guide the process at the school community. From there, a steering committee of students is also formed. And this group of students really are the people that are charged with leading the process on their campus and shaping the process. They go into their campus communities and they collect ideas from the entire school about how they want to see those dollars spent during the brainstorming ideas phase. From there, the top ideas are developed through research on eligibility and feasibility and sustainability, all those different parameters of the budget process into full-fledged project proposals. The school community comes together again to deliberate on the pros and cons of those projects that are going to be on the ballot. They campaign for their top ideas, and then ultimately the entire school comes back together and they vote for which project they want to see funded on their campus. And in the end, the winning project is implemented, and then the process is evaluated by the participants, so it can improve for cycle after cycle. You can head to the next slide, Tara. So since 2016, when that video was shot by the Participatory Budgeting Project, which is a national organization here in the United States and really North America that helps to seed and support PB processes at the municipal level and also at the school level. The PB processes in Arizona have really grown exponentially. So now we're engaging upwards of 50,000 students annually across 5 different school districts in Arizona. So Phoenix Union is district-wide in their process, all 20 campuses, about 30,000 students. Then there is Chandler Unified School District, who has 13 schools in their district participating. We have Queen Creek Unified, Mesa Public Schools, and then also 2 high schools in Tucson, which is located in southern Arizona. One thing that's really exciting when we're thinking about kind of long-term impacts on civic life in Arizona is that we've been able to partner with some of the local voter or electoral institutions and voter mobilization organizations here in Arizona to also register students that are eligible to vote for future elections through their school PB vote days. So they go in, they cast their ballot for which project they want to see funded, and then if they're eligible to register for real elections, they have the opportunity to do so right there on that school PB vote day. And since 2016, we've registered 5,000 new voters for Arizona, which is really exciting when we're thinking about students not only kind of practicing democracy through the process, but then being able to actualize that in real life as they move forward into college and career. Another really exciting outcome is that since 2016, there's been about 85 student-led campus improvement projects that have been implemented across these participating campuses. And the different types of projects, you heard some of them in the video. A lot of them are very like Arizona desert centric projects. There's lots of water filtration systems and shade structures, like misting, cooling systems for outdoor seating. We've also seen like school gardens, murals, school mascots, and then even some social emotional learning projects come out. We had a school therapy dog that won at one of our schools. We've also seen like meditation or Zen room. So really lots of different projects have been funded through this process, but primarily they've focused on capital investments. And that's by nature of the budgets that have been allocated. We'll talk at the end of the presentation about a new innovation that might be able to fund some projects outside of just capital. But really the school PB process provides students with meaningful opportunities to develop their student agency, as Danielle mentioned, and really increase their CASP, right? Their civic knowledge, their attitudes, their skills and practices for the future. So they're working on, problem solving skills, teamwork, and collaboration throughout the entire process. And then of course, the process also builds community and improves the school climate by improving cohesion, trust, communication between the students, teachers, and school leaders. It really provides space for all of those stakeholders to build meaningful relationships. And long-term, the process provides students with opportunities and pathways to build their civic muscles that are necessary for long-term participation in civic life. So in Arizona, there's kind of 4 unique dimensions that are different from other places where school PB has taken place. Tara, if you can go to the next slide. The first is that in Arizona, I think we're on a different one. Can you go to thank you, and then we'll flip back. Sorry. So the first is that the process originated in a school setting here. So typically in places that have school PB, they've had a municipal level process first, and then it kind of trickles down to the school setting. But in Arizona, we have one municipal process that's out in a small town here called Wickenburg. But really the process started at the school level, and now we're starting to see some interest at the city level. So that's an interesting kind of feature of the Arizona experiment. The second one is that it's been an incremental approach. So other places where school PB has been adopted, sometimes it's been mandated, right, from a high level, and it's really gone into mass adoption. An entire school district or is implementing the process by mandate. And here it's really been, like one school starting it, kind of testing it out, and then it's grown incrementally throughout the district. Another defining feature is that we're now engaging high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools in school PB here in Arizona. So we had our first pilot of elementary school PB with Queen Creek Unified. Last year, they did it with one campus of elementary school students. And this next year, as we head into the next academic year, they're expanding that to all 9 of their elementary schools. So we'll have 9 elementary schools in Arizona going through the school PB process. And those are students as young as kindergarten through 6th grade. And then the fourth one is really this pioneering experience here. So because of the incremental approach to adoption, we're able to test out some innovations at a small scale and then really share those practices and new kind of interventions with the rest of the school PB community here. And it really acts as a catalyst to others. We'll talk about how the inclusive model of school PB is now catalyzing that in other places, and also the new innovation that Phoenix Union is doing as well with reimagining school safety. Then I think if you go back, Tara, to perfect. So some of these innovations or examples of these innovations are the birth to expansion. So that really showcases how the approach here has been incremental. Danielle mentioned earlier that the first school PB process started here with one school called Bioscience High School in 2013. And the principal there at the time, Quentin Boyce, he allocated a portion of his principal's discretionary funds, I think about $2,000, and tried this process out. And then from there, they implemented the process a few years, and the district, Phoenix Union High School District, said, let's do this at the district level. And that was in 2016 when they piloted it with 5 schools. And the process has just continued to grow and expand to now those 5 school districts, 50,000 students annually. Another example of an innovation, which we'll describe in more detail, is the inclusive school PB model. So this is where we are intentionally engaging all students in the school community, but particularly students with disabilities in every single phase of the school PB model. And then lastly, Tara will talk about the most recent innovation in school PB happening here in Arizona, which is with Phoenix Union, where they're now using the PB process to reimagine what school safety looks like on all 20 of their campuses. They're working with students, staff, and community members to go through this PB process, and they're allocating $1.2 million annually over the course of 3 years to do that work. All right, so then I'll talk a little bit more about the inclusive school PB model. So in the 2019-2020 academic year, we partnered with a funding agency here in Arizona called the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. And this was really to implement a process that intentionally engaged students with disabilities in each phase. Another kind of foundational element to that innovation was this idea of the 3 concentric circles of participation. So in the previous 4 years of observing the school PB models, we really saw that there were 3 different levels of participation among the student body. You have that first circle that's pretty small in the center there. That's usually made up of the steering committee students, and they're having the most opportunities to engage in the process, and consequently, they're also having the highest impact in terms of civic learning outcomes too. Then you have the second circle. These students might propose ideas for how they want to see the budget allocated. They might, advocate for some ideas that are on the final ballot, and of course they would vote. And then you have the third concentric circle, that outside circle, and that is majority of the student body. And those are students that basically just vote in that final phase. They participate in that way. And our goal was to basically collapse that third concentric circle and bring everyone into the first and second. And so we did this in a couple of ways. One was through inclusive representation. So we basically implemented a mini public model for the steering committee, in which the steering committee members were representative of the broader student body demographics. We also increased opportunities for engagement for those outside concentric circles. One way was through connections to curriculum and standards. So we worked with the social studies teachers on the middle school campus that we were implementing this on, to have the idea collection take place there, to have opportunities for deliberation and dialogue around the different project proposals throughout the process. And that really brought in opportunities for participation by the broader student body in deliberation, dialogue, and decision-making throughout the process. We also made sure that students were able to engage in the process with by ensuring that our communication mediums were inclusive too. So we made sure that we were using large print font for students who might have visual impairments. We also made sure that we were using different communication modalities like PowerPoint presentations, flyers, videos, tabling, word of mouth, all different types of things. We used visual aids on the ballot so that students, when they were conducting their vote, were able to see the projects instead of having to read a description about them. And then finally, we emphasized the engagement of the entire school community. So not only did students have the opportunity to participate in idea collection and in the voting process, teachers, staff, and family members did as well. So we had a separate vote for parents at the end of the process where they were able to cast their ballots for which project they wanted to see funded as well. All right, so that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Tara to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes that we saw from the inclusive model.
Yes, thank you. So these are really some three broadly findings that we've put together. And the first one was that from all the students and all the teachers and the parents that we engaged with throughout the process, all of them reported having a meaningful and positive experience in terms of their engagement throughout the process. The second overarching finding is that from the students themselves, through the focus groups and the surveys that we conducted, all the students voiced an increased likelihood of civic engagement, specifically students with disabilities, and even more specifically through the act of voting. And the third overarching finding was that the proposals that were brought forth by the students were actually very responsive to the needs and voices of students with disabilities. So we saw a lot of projects speak to what would be kind of like traditional or usual accommodations for students in the school setting. And we think that this was a result of having students with disabilities engaging throughout that process. To be a little more specific, we're revisiting the CASP, which again is the acronym for the knowledge, attitudes, skills, and practices of civic engagement. And we administer a survey that asks specific indicator questions for each of these areas. And these were the biggest changes that we saw. So within the knowledge area, there was great increases around the participatory democracy, students knowing how decisions are made within their school, and then also being aware of the needs of students in their school. In the practices category, we saw great gains in students being able to talk with others about their problems. So a little bit more of that advocacy and that confidence came through. Also the ability to work or the desire to work on more school improvement projects. So kind of that continuing to be a part of the school community, have their voices heard, and then also their ability to help make decisions within the school itself. Specifically for students with disabilities, which is that acronym SWD there at the end, their skills that they had the greatest gains in were public speaking and also the ability to make decisions. Overall, we saw that the participatory model in terms of inclusivity improved the relationships between students and teachers and administrators on the school campus, which also included a level of trust and then cohesion amongst students as well. There was student voice and self-advocacy that was cited as being amplified, and then also students being able to deliberate and make decisions within their classrooms when it came time for those phases of the project, and then also during the voting phase. And overall, just really an increased propensity to one, vote, but then also be more engaged and volunteer both within their school and their greater community. For the teachers themselves, we saw gains across several areas. The top part with the smaller bullet points above the dashed line are actually what teachers observed amongst students engaged in the process. So teachers themselves within their focus group interview cited students being showing more agency, having empowerment and confidence, all the way down to those leadership skills that they gained throughout the process. And again, this wasn't just the student steering committee, it was the student body as a whole, and looking at their classes in which they facilitated the different phases of the process. Below that dashed line were actually what the teachers inherently themselves experienced. Many of them thought to kind of reframe a lot of what's been done at school, both within classrooms, but then also with extracurricular activities, just being more mindful around inclusive practices. So who's not at the table or who can we bring in for a different perspective? Also an increase, teachers cited wanting to do more democratic simulations within their classrooms beyond just the vote day during the process. And many of the teachers themselves took on additional leadership roles within their school or district after the process as well. And the final innovation that Madison had touched on a bit is taking place right now in Phoenix Union High School District within their 20 schools. And it really is a focus on bringing in social justice and school safety into the school participatory budgeting process. And this came out of a non-renewal of the contract with the local police department in Phoenix, Arizona. And instead, those monies are going to be reinvested back into the school community so that students, parents, and teachers are able to engage on how they want their schools to look and feel safe. The total budget after the non-renewal contracts is $3.6 million total, which breaks down to about $1.2 million for the next 3 years, beginning this year. And that takes us to the end, and we have our email addresses there. We can certainly also pop them into the chat, but it looks like we have about 40 minutes, 38 to be exact, for any questions, comments, or discussion.